Hello and welcome to another episode of Sass Bites. This is your weekly bite of sass during your lunch break. I am your host, Micah Godbolt, and along with me, my cohort, Elise, is here to help us with these interviews. We've been going through, this is week 3 of a series on front-end architecture. After talking about front-end architecture at CSS DevConf this last year, I really felt heavy about just needing to continue the momentum of this. Keep talking about it. Keep bringing it up. Keep talking to some of the people out there that are doing these things. So this interview series has been exactly that, bringing on some special guests to talk about the work that they do, whether they are actually officially called a front-end architect or they just have the role. But before we get into that, I want to give just another quick primer in case you didn't catch the talk. Or a couple of last episodes. The concept of front-end architecture is that a lot of us are doing this role of architecting our front end, our build systems, and then everything that goes into it. But we don't really have the title. We're not given the space. We're not given the time. We're not given the authority to do a lot of these things. Front-end architecture for me is really comes down to 4 main things. Comes down to the code that you're writing. It comes down to the approach to the code, like. Are you taking an object-oriented approach? Are you doing a fun approach, as we're going to be talking with Ben Frame?
Having an approach, perhaps, and not just
having an approach. Exactly. Like, what is your approach for the code? And not only the CSS, but also the HTML and even the JavaScript. Like, how are you approaching a modularization, and what kind of frameworks are you bringing in, those types of things. Secondly is documentation. Is how are you documenting the system? Because it's going to get large. There's going to be lots of pieces to it. And if you're not documenting as you go, the whole system is just going to be unusable to anyone except for the people that have that intimate knowledge of the entire system. On top of that, testing. Whether you're doing behavioral testing, unit testing, or the new fun visual regression testing, all of these things, all this testing allows you to continue to build larger systems without breaking everything you've done in the past. And for systems that grow to pretty large sizes, it's a huge thing to have inside of your system. Otherwise, you can't really make changes without fear of breaking things. And then on top of that, there's kind of this automation that wraps the whole thing together. Is how do you get it so someone can come into a project and within minutes have all the dependencies, have all the tools, have all of the tasks that they can run to get code compiled and committed. That is what automation is all about, whether it's just locally with Brent and Gulp, pushing it up to the cloud with the Jenkins or Travis CI. All of those things kind of put together create your architecture, all the foundations and all the pieces that create the system that allows you to do amazing things. One of the tenets we typically talk about with front-end architecture is that when you're writing code as an architect, you're not writing code that really ends up in the browser. It's really you're writing code that's going to be used by other developers to build what gets into their browser.
I was just about to chime in and say that's my favorite tenet of front-end architecture as compared to being a front-end developer, that you are writing code for other developers. Your users are your coworkers and your other developers, and that makes a huge distinction, in my opinion, about the way that you do things, the way that you write your code. So.
Exactly. Yeah, this last couple of days I found myself writing a grunt task that will automatically update version numbers, create a new branch, compile or add compiled assets, create tags, push tags, basically so that somebody can come in, hit a button, and push out a new release of the code. So that.
Can you send me that? I need that. I'm serious.
It's a little bit specific to our use case, but we can talk about it because it's pretty awesome that you can do that. Because otherwise it was like this 15-step 15-step process that our other developers had to go through to do this. And it's error prone, and you screw something up and whatnot. And then with this, it's like boom, and I can tell it whether it's like a pre-release or a minor bug fix or a major release and those kind of things. It's pretty sweet. So anyway, we can talk about that later. Was just thinking about I really need to do a full-on grunt series on Sass Bites because there's a ton of stuff I've been getting into recently that really helps out this process. So anyway, that's front-end architecture. That's me getting on a rant, which typically happens when we start talking about this kind of stuff.
That's all of it. That's all of front-end architecture. You covered everything.
Sweet. So yeah, those are the 4 pillars. I came up with those quite a while ago, and I still feel really good about those. Code's really huge. There's lots to it, but code, documentation, testing, automation. So anyway, those are the tools that you have when you're a front-end architect. And the architect that we have on today, I'm really excited to talk to, is Smith Schwartz. She is a former museum experience designer, which sounds like a really cool job. She's a digital and reverse nomad, which we'll definitely talk about because she's in a new time zone this time. We talked to her a little while ago. She currently lives out in Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky now, drinking way too much Ale 8, which I am extremely jealous. And she's a front-end developer and maybe changing job title, designer at Same Media, building the future of web-based publishing, I believe is their tagline. So Smith, thanks for coming on the show this week.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for sitting through my lengthy intro. I always feel bad. It's like we invite somebody on and they just sit around for 10 minutes while I talk. Try and get through and get into that.
Yeah, it's cool to hear front-end architecture displayed so succinctly and in this nice little package.
Well, thank you very much. I'm doing my best. So you, I know we talked about this before, but I'm trying to remember it again. Reverse nomad. So what's this whole reverse nomad thing, and why are you back in Kentucky?
Okay, so for 2 years, my husband and I lived as digital nomads, where we moved every month or two to a new city, and we both worked remotely. We traveled kind of all around the Americas, like Central, South, and North America. But after that, we moved to San Francisco, and we were living in other people's homes who were out traveling. So we lived for 6 months in a friend of ours' home who were out in Asia. Then we lived for 6 months in a friend of ours' home who were out in Europe. And so we were kind of reverse nomading, enabling other people to go nomad while we were still living, not really having a home of our own. So it was a kind of interesting thing. And we just got to Kentucky about a month ago. I'm coming to you live from my brother's guest room. We're still not totally settled
still
in a
nomading.
real place. Still kind of nomading and figuring it out. Looking for a place right now.
So please tell us what you're doing in Kentucky, because I know a little bit about this, but I'm so cool, and I want to hear the whole story.
So I grew up here, but I left when I was 18 and haven't really been back for visits, but have never lived here since then. And as we were kind of traveling around, we started to look for more of a home base, and this kind of made sense. My husband is now, through kind of a random circumstances of events, he's now an open data officer for the city of Lexington through doing a Code for America fellowship. So that kind of situation kind of fell into our laps, and it was well, it makes sense for us to get back here. There's a lot of great tech stuff happening around in a smaller community, which it's I don't know that San Francisco really needs more people like us. I think other communities need people like us, and so we're happy to be here and to be getting involved locally and regionally too. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in Chattanooga and Columbia, Charlotte, all these kind of smaller markets have really interesting tech scenes, and so we're excited to be here and to be involved in that kind of stuff.
I think that's so cool. I made friends with Jesse and Amanda Harlan in Oklahoma City, and they're kind of doing the same thing. It's what Austin might have been 10 years ago, or they will be Austin in 10 years, and really be, they have, startup incubators and small events and a small conference. And I think that's so great that you're trying to bring that to places that are not San Francisco, New York. I think we need so much more of that, kind of bring that tech culture and bring this kind of industry stuff out there. So major.
Yeah. Yeah, and the cool part is I'm still working with my job in San Francisco, so I get to go back and forth. In fact, I'm going back in about a week and a half, so it's exciting to, still keep my connections out there and all of my awesome coworkers and friends, and so it gives me an excuse to get back to the West Coast.
Awesome. So speaking of Same Media, it's a good segue. We can jump right over to that. Mm-hmm. One of the questions we always ask our guests every time, being the last 2 times, but we'll continue to ask, is when did you find yourself realizing that you're no longer really writing code that ends up on a browser, that you're really doing the architecture of a project? When did that first kind of kick in for you?
So really, I'm still writing a lot of production code. I still do both, and I'm still a designer, so I'm kind of doing all of these things. But I think I started getting really interested in how do I scale myself? I can write a bunch of CSS, but it takes me as one person a long time to really like get it to be the way I want to. So how do we teach other engineers to get excited about it and want to write production ready CSS? And you know, whether it's designers or other engineers, like trying to scale that to a wider group. And also so it's interesting, you didn't bring up design at all in your front-end architecture pillars. And I wonder if you feel like that's completely outside of the realm, because for me, I think it's a big part of it. Like, I think the UX and the experience is also a big part of what's happening on the front end. I always say writing good, clean, dry Sass is a slippery slope into caring about design and thinking about design culture and your engineering culture.
That's such a good way to put it. That's so good.
So I've been doing a series of like internal workshops and lectures about design and about Sass, and as well as like doing some external talks. I have a talk called Sass for Engineers, and it's about getting your engineers to actually care about writing good Sass, because I think all engineers know how to write Sass, but a lot of times that just means cruft at the bottom of the file, like overwriting stuff to like muscle it into place. And so how do we get people to care about refactoring? How do you get people to care about, you know, following naming conventions and writing things the correct way? And I feel like once you get people to that point, they're also going to start caring about design, and they're also, because they're going to be working in the browser and looking at things more and visually testing things more. So that's kind of my like mantra.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because a lot of what I'm doing at my job is because there's a design initiative to do a bunch of redesigns. That's kind of where I got to come in and be the front-end architect on this project and kind of like figure out how do we scale it? How do we take out all the cruft and junk that we have? How do we kind of refactor? How do we do that with a new design? And that's, honestly, I hadn't really thought about the impact of design on front-end architecture until you were just kind of talking about it. But I think that's, maybe we'll have to add a question to our podcast interview list. But I definitely think it's related and possibly missing.
But I think there are probably different kinds of front-end architects too. Like, I think there are people who skew more into the JavaScript layer and who skew more into like writing grunt tasks and doing these kind of more like automated, like more engineering tasks. And then I think there are front-end architects who kind of skew more towards the design layer and the presentation layer, who are actually doing some UX work and who are you know, working on making sure that the design is refined and as best as it can be.
Well, and even engineering of Sass-related things, of automating your Sass and your CSS so that can be cleaned up or ready to go to production or future-proof or whatever. And I think there's a lot of overlap there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think the Sass and the templating is where everybody kind of overlaps, it seems.
Yeah, a bit of that falls into that big nebulous code one at the top.
Right.
Code, I mean, the object-oriented approach that you're taking, how you break things up into components, how you apply the style across everything. So, yeah, I can certainly see either. I love being four. I love 4 items. And I hate breaking code up, because it's like, then how many do you break it up into? Like another 6 or something? So whether it's a different term needs to be up there, but yeah, how do you approach taking a design and turning that into a system, rather than because like right now we're having discussions about like what is a component, like we occasionally have designs that use pieces that we could probably break down to smaller pieces, but that design is kind of in itself an entity. And we want to keep it namespace together.
You would like never use that smaller piece anywhere else, even though it could be more modular.
Well, no, you probably could. Like the big one that keeps coming up is like a call to action button. Like, we've got a component that's just simply a CTA. It's like, if you just need to drop a button down somewhere, if you just need to like combine a couple things and add a button in, there's a button component. Like, you can do that. But then we have all these other components that have call to actions in them. So then the question is, do you just reuse the markup from the CTA component, or what I prefer doing is, hey, this is a blog teaser component that has a call to action on it. So that blog teaser is a component, and we just happen to be extending the same styles in this one as we are in the CTA component.
Gotcha.
And for me, that makes more sense, because like what happens when that CTA is no longer a button and it's just text, or we need to change margins, or the padding's can be different on that one, or like, it's that blog teaser, it's its own entity, and it gets its own namespacing, and it gets its styles applied to it directly from those classes. So anyway.
Smith, when you're talking about design and that you're still kind of doing some design and that your front-end architecture role is more design-based, is that kind of the same stuff that you were talking about, or what kind of design stuff are you working on? Design/architecture.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much am. If you want to talk about the day-to-day of my job, I pretty much exclusively write Sass all day. I mean, that's the bulk of what I do.
Yeah, so fun.
Which is great. Whether that's like building new features or refactoring, or writing code for other people to use, it kind of varies. But I think I'm pretty much just writing Sass all day. But sometimes that means working directly with a designer, and sometimes it means working directly with an engineer. So I kind of like bridge the gap between those two departments a little bit.
And so go ahead.
I was going to say, let's go ahead and move on, because I certainly want to get to some of these other topics.
Sure, yeah.
One thing we were talking about before we started the show is that you are actually in the process of kind of redefining your position and writing your job description. And I'm sure a lot of people are very jealous, because they would love to be able to sit down and write what they want to be doing. So tell us how the process is going and what that job description is starting to look like.
Well, first I would say, nobody's stopping you from writing your own job description, so I hope everybody is able to, at least on their own, kind of feel like that they are empowered to do that, and then you can bring that to your manager or your boss and say, like, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'd like to be doing. I tried to kind of break it into two buckets of two big things that I do. I think one is kind of, I guess I can just read it. That might be the easiest thing to do. Work collaboratively as an advocate for design and front-end standards with visual UX designers, product managers, software architects, engineers, and business stakeholders. And so then that's broken down into four more specific buckets of, architectural oversight for front-end, continual development and maintenance of style guides, documentation, best practices, materials, and tools, mentoring the team on proper design and Sass principles, effective techniques, through code reviews, workshops, and one-on-one collaboration, hands-on involvement of the product cycle from cradle to release, and continuous improvement and dedication to deliver the best solution. And then the second big bucket.
Pretty amazing. I like it.
The second big bucket is like internal and external thought leadership of the presentation layer technologies and space. And so this is
space.
Well, that space in the tech world and internally. So talking about like, not actual space, but talking about
the true astronaut.
Yes. Oh, that's a good point.
Nice.
Maybe that should be my new title.
I think that's, forget front-end architecture. Just
astronaut. This bucket is all about like whether it's through recruiting and public speaking and internal workshops, internal presentations to get people more excited about the front end and Sass and keeping everything tip top.
Awesome. That's fun. I think everyone should probably sit down and just have that experience or the exercise of writing out what they would love to do.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before the show started, kind of about how cool it is to write down, like, what am I good at? What do I like doing? What do I enjoy working on? What do I not enjoy working on? And Smith said, what are the things that I wish I could do more of but haven't gotten to do in my particular role in the past? And, I think for everybody, regardless of whether you're trying to get front-end architecture as your official title or whatever it is that you're trying to do, it's worth knowing those things about yourself and about your role and kind of seeing, like, helping yourself recognize opportunities, because you can say, oh, I know that that's a thing that I want to do. And I was telling Smith before, I was lucky enough to write my job description with my manager for my current role, and it's really, really cool to kind of go in knowing, like, okay, this is my niche, like, this is the thing that I'm really good at, and I'm going to get to focus on it and kind of define what that looks like. And so, yeah, highly recommend.
Awesome. Now, the work that you're doing at Same Media, when we talked earlier last year, when we were you spoke at SassConf, right? So I had you on talking for that. You told me a bit about the project, and I was like, wow, I really want to hear more about this project because it sounds really interesting. We didn't have time then, so I was hoping you could give us a little rundown of what you're trying to do, some of the architectural challenges that you're having, and like how you're solving some of those. We're really curious to hear about it.
Yeah, so we have a publishing platform called Tempest, and that's our main product at Say. It is a CMS and then also a site code base, and I work mainly on the site code base. And so we host a lot of mid-level publishers, so everybody from Rachel Ray to biography.com, fashionista.com, XOJane, ReadWrite, which is a great tech blog. So we kind of, our market is we focus on those like mid-tier publishers like The Guardian or Huffington Post. They don't need a CMS. They need an in-house solution because it's so custom and so big. And then, you know, like my cookie blog doesn't need anything special because I get, you know, 4 page views a year and like, you know, it's just for me and my friends.
I really want to read it.
I need to write it because it doesn't exist. But you know, but so we go, our partners are these mid-tier publishers who are trying to make a living, who are making a living on the web, and so we try to enable them to have a bigger share of the market and to grow them with Tempest. And so it's really interesting from the front end because we, you know, all of this, everything, all of the Sass, we really leverage Sass to get the unique designs to each site. So everything is coded in variables, and each site has their own page or their own main.scss that has a list of all those variables, whether it's colors, backgrounds, outlines, SVGs, all that stuff that goes in there, and that gives each site its own unique look and feel. So it's a very big challenge every time we add a new feature or release because we have to see how it's going to look on all the different sites. And so right now we're at 15 sites. We're hoping to grow to about 100 in the next year if we stay on track with all of this. So it's really exciting, but it does become more and more complicated from a front-end perspective because when you're at 100 sites, you can't visually test every single one every single day. So we're looking at adding more visual regression tools and doing some things like that. We're not quite there yet, but I'm excited to get there soon.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
That is a large project to undertake. We're kind of doing something similar, but we're really just looking at maybe like 2 or 3 sites, maybe 4 or 5 at the largest.
Yeah.
So trying to create something that's going to work for hundreds of sites, also with all the variability of being able to make all those changes just through a set of variables is pretty awesome.
Right. And then there's also a site config.
You have this like look on your face, like, oh God, what am I getting into?
Yeah, but I think it's doable, and like the power of Sass really makes it doable. I don't think we wouldn't have been able to do it in quite this way, you know, like 7 years ago or something.
Absolutely
before these
I
kinds
can't
of
even imagine
existed.
the stuff that we do now. Like, I can't even imagine having to do some of that with just CSS. Like the complexity of sites that we're building. I would not want to do that job.
So you must be using a lot of tools then, because you're compiling Sass with a different set of variables for every single site. I'm sure you have quite a build process. One of the things I was kind of curious, what are the tools that you're using, or even looking to use, as you talked about trying to get into some visual regression testing? What are the current tools and future tools that you're evaluating?
I would really love to get into using something like Phantom CSS and Phantom JS to do more of that visual regression testing. Like, we actually had a coworker of mine and I did a hackathon project where we built a little, or prototyped anyway, a visual regression testing suite, which was great. Where you take it takes a screenshot and then like compares it to the one that is the screenshot of record and moves forward. We haven't built that into our system yet, but I would really like to get that there. And we have a custom build. It's a project called Finch. It's kind of a wrapper around things like Grunt and all the tasks that compile our Sass for us. Oh, and we're also on libsass, which is exciting because it's really fast.
It's always fun. Yeah, we're definitely evaluating that right now, especially as a lot of our other tools like Suzy and Breakpoint are now getting libsass compatible.
They're getting more. Yeah, it's getting there. So and I think it sounds like from hearing Chris and Natalie talk about it, like they're looking towards more supporting, like Ruby Sass is more the Sass of development, and libsass will be the Sass that people actually use in production, because it's just really getting hard to keep dealing with the Ruby compile times, and especially as your projects get bigger, and we saved a lot of development time just by switching to libsass. Even though we lost some features at the time, it was worth it for us.
Definitely. I think there's even talk. I know Chris opened up a issue or something about getting a Compass, a libsass version of Compass as well. So bringing that
Oh,
over and bringing over a lot of the goodies, especially one of the great things with Compass is being able to import other projects easily. So I'd love to be able to see that rather than having to like finagle it with Bower or something like that. It'd be great to have one kind of wrapper around all of that. But anyway, I
yeah,
digress
that would be cool.
or regress or something. Are you using? I know, sorry. Are you using any style guides? Is that something that you're implementing at Say Media?
No, we don't have a style guide, but we do have what we call a test site, and that is just kind of our own like version that we keep where the content stays the same. So the problem with us is like all of our sites have brand new content every day, so a visual regression test isn't going to work so well. But we have a test site where we have all of the components that we could possibly use on any site in one place, so it's easier to test there. And that's what we kind of use for our like visual regression prototype. I would also like to start building out a style guide so that it makes it easier for engineers to build new widgets and new components as they come along, because I think if we had like a more traditional, like here's the HTML you use, here's the CSS you use, and then you could just put it together, I think like it would really like increase or decrease the time it takes to build new components.
Yeah, having a static display of all your components is about 50% of what we're using the style guide for is having a like I need to see like we have this calendar item or like event node or whatever, and it's got like 50 different like fields in it. But the thing is, most people only use 4. So like the place you go in the live site to an event, like
you don't see them all.
See like 4 of them, or and to go and actually create that item inside of the CMS takes forever. Fill out like tons of fields and click. So having a style guide or at least having a place where you can go where here's the entire component, every single field that can possibly be there, and then having that's a place where you can do visual regression where you bring it in code and like what changed, like the thing you expected to change actually changed, or did a bunch of stuff change?
We're working on the same thing. We've been kind of tossing around how we might actually deliver templates as well as Sass, like actually deliver bits of HTML in terms of, you're talking about like prototyping new features very quickly, or we do a ton of A/B testing, and so like I want 90% of this, and then I want to be able to like add my own stuff or like have my own content or whatever on top of it. And so we haven't figured it out yet, but that's definitely something that we've been working on to try to like make things have faster iteration for our developers.
Right, because for us, in publishing, it's really just kind of like repeating a lot of the same design patterns over and over, but in different packages. So for instance, like a recipe versus an article versus a DIY versus a gallery, and so it's like a lot of these systems are repeated over and over, but they're just kind of organized differently. So I would love to have one place where an engineer can go and be like, okay, this is the body copy, this is what a header looks like, this is what a featured header looks like, this is what, and then you could just like copy paste into a new component, and then you're kind of ready to go. There may be some like small extra bit of Sass that needs to be written, but I think for the most part you could prototype things really quickly if we had something like that.
Yep, that's kind of the system we're building now, where you can go into a component, you can see the markup that is needed to present that component, and if you implement that exact HTML and use the CSS we've already given you, then it's just going to display exactly like it should and behave exactly like it should.
Right, and then when we make updates or design updates, or we change fonts or paddings or other variables, like it's just going to automatically get that, and you don't have to maintain a bunch of different templates. Like that would be my ultimate goal. Like right now everything's pretty siloed, and so it would be great to kind of unify that stuff. And I noticed that in your spreadsheet you didn't have any Sass Drama, but I have some Sass Drama.
Oh, nice, go for it.
So I kind of feel like. So, and this is just me, I don't know, this is just a kind of a brand new idea I'm having. And I know you guys are having Jonathan Snook on soon, but I kind of feel like Smacks might not be the way to go anymore. I feel like...
Laying down the hot drama. Why?
I think as we move more towards web components and things like that, I think it's better to have more presentational class names than semantically tied class names. Like, I think having things so directly tied to the content is it gets us into a little bit of trouble, and it means we have to like keep repeating mixins over and over, which makes our compiled CSS much bigger and bloated. And I almost think it's better to go more, you kind of were talking about this a little bit earlier, but like almost better to repeat the same class names over and over. And I think that comes from having more of the design thinking in my mind of being like, well, why should this have a specific padding? Like everything should, if it's one design component that's repeated over and over, it should, and we change the padding in one place, we should be changing the padding everywhere. Like it shouldn't be so separated.
I think I see where you're going with that. One of the things that I like about the way that I've been structuring my Sass stuff, a lot of it is having kind of like this generic layer and then this like semantic layer also. And I think for me, so we have like there's a feature that we're working on right now, and it's like product cards. So there's like a grid of products that will link out, and it's all base typography and grid. And so there's no real need for individual semantic class names. However, I, at least in my experience and in working with developers who are not traditionally thinking about design, you get a ticket that's like, hey, go update this product card. What do? You're going to search for product card. You're going to look for the product card SCSS file. Maybe it doesn't exist, so you make one and you add this additional style, or you need to change the width of it, so you go change it in this, like, override this product card class, rather than, like, we don't want you to edit the grid, but then if that file doesn't exist already and that name doesn't exist already, then maybe that's what you do. You go edit the grid, and then that causes problems down the line. And so I think I still kind of, at least in my particular situation, and yours, considering you're doing more of a CMS thing, might be very, very different. But for me, all that style can come from the grid. I still want it to have a product card class name. I still want to have kind of semantic names in there so that I can link my view and my Sass and my naming kind of all one-to-one, so that I know exactly where to look. I know exactly where to update it, even if there's not really any like style there per se. But I mean, again, like I've been working with big organizations, 40, 50 something, engineers who are like working on all these things, A/B testing all this stuff, and so I'm more afraid of the non-bulletproofness of that system.
Right. I see your point for sure, but I don't know. I feel like if it's a widget that's repeated, but maybe within different content, like we have a repeatable design pattern that goes from a reading list to a cover line to an injected product or injected article within the body of an article, and they all pretty much look the same, but yet there's like 3 different Sass files for each one. So I guess my point is, why not have one Sass file? Yeah, so why not have one Sass file that controls all 3 of them, and then when we update one, we update all. And I think in that way it's like one source of truth versus many sources of truth. So I think like one's bulletproof more towards one way and one's bulletproof more towards the other way. I don't know, maybe the temporary solution is to have presentational and semantic class names together.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
That's kind of where we're at right now.
And I know there's some like extend/mixin drama, but my thing with extends is they should have a relationship, right? And so if you have, for something like that, if you have like, this is the like title, and that's a placeholder extend, and then you can have 3 semantic names for like all 3 places that you have that thing, and extend, but it's the relationship, right? Like those things have a relationship, and then you don't extend that title thing in like a comment title because it's not related. And so I like that kind of dual abstraction layer of like the generic and then like still having semantic names. So let us know how that goes, what you kind of end up with. I'm really, really curious.
Yeah, and like I said, it's still in the infancy of like trying to figure out what the next step is, but I'm really interested in experimenting with moving away from that.
Yeah, there's a bit of drama that we didn't actually get to do because it was 2 weeks ago when I ended up being sick then. But Ben Frayne wrote a great article recently that kind of hits a lot of these topics of like how far do you abstract? Like is a pure OO approach the way to go? Like should we just say, hey, that's if that's header ABC, then we should have class header ABC on it. If that is list of blue background, whatever. It should have that class on it.
Is this his OCSS, Atomic CSS, or Responsive Web Design anti-patterns?
Yes, the anti-patterns, exactly.
Smackdown.
So I'm looking forward to having him come in and talk about that. And a lot of it is kind of that, where you have, at least in my approach, you have a lot of common elements that are wrapped up in little extends or little mixins, whichever path you want to go on, that are then applied to each of those components. So you still have things tied together. You still have one single source of truth for that title.
Right.
But then when you go to a component that is my blog teaser, back to that one again, there is a blog teaser component, and the blog teaser component probably just has 5 extents in it, that just extending 5 pieces of typography. And that's all it's doing is gluing those things together.
Right.
So it'll be interesting.
And that's my approach currently, is to just keep the class names as are, because we have a nice Max architecture, and to use mixins to reuse those styles over and over. But it still kind of seems like, well, why do we have all these class names? Like, it seems like too many.
Well, read the article from Ben, because he puts a lot of those. I think it comes down to it might be a little more bloat, but the maintainability over a lifetime is the benefit that you get. Is that when you want to go and change that blog teaser without changing everything in your entire system, it's really easy to do, rather than having to go in and change class names or create new things or whatever. You can just go to that partial and change the extend, and you're done. And that's it. And you're not breaking anything except changing that one.
Right.
So, yeah, it'll be neat to talk with Jonathan. I think he's actually next week. To talk to him and see kind of when Smax came out, that was practically pre-Sass, or at least pre Sass being extremely popular. So kind of curious to know, has his methodologies changed? Has his approach to Smax changed much since we have these new tools?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question.
Yeah, because the same way with the original OOCSS, the only way you had to apply that one title is to go to the element and put the class everywhere. That's really the only approach you could really take. Whereas now we have an extend that we can just apply everywhere we want. And so, as tools change, some of these methodologies change.
The methodology should grow with them.
Yeah, but the concept is still there, that you have all these small, discrete, reusable pieces that you can apply anywhere you want. So
and we had Brad Frost on last week, and I frankly don't think the atomic design thing is really all that different from the Smax setup. You can get into that's design and this is class naming and CSS, but I think conceptually they actually work really well together. And kind of back to you're talking about presentational classes, I feel like I personally have not liked OOCSS, but I feel like the longer I do this, the more I find that there are some little places where OOCSS actually is the right solution in some small ways. But I think as a total system, no. But that's the thing. People are like, oh, what class naming system do you use? It's like, well, a little bit of all of these things, right? Because there's all these different places that they work better or worse one way or the other.
Right, and I feel like that's the reality of what happens at different, in different projects. You kind of pick and choose and cherry pick what works for you in that environment, because every environment is so different.
Yeah, and every project is going to be different. Every team is going to be different, and that's kind of the fun thing. Or kind of tough too, because I change projects so rarely that it's my entire outlook on web development has changed from one project to the next.
Right.
So everything is a complete rewrite, because all the other stuff I did was crap, because it's that was a year and a half ago.
Yeah, you're like, I hate myself. What did I do?
Well, awesome. I think we've got some pretty exciting interviews to come up in the future. That'd be great to talk with Jonathan, talk with Ben, kind of get their opinions on their approaches these days, and how are they naming things? How are they doing things? What pros and cons are they seeing? How are they leveraging Sass to do that, and those types of things? So, Smith, it's been great to finally get a chance to talk to you a little bit more about project, about what you're doing, about good old Kentucky soda, and all that kind of fun stuff. So thank you for coming on the show today, and I definitely hope that everything goes well with your new job description, and I hope you get a nice, shiny front-end architect title that you definitely deserve.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was great to talk to you both.
Awesome.
Thank you.
At least thanks for coming in again to co-host, and
As
your
usual.
connection was solid this time.
This time.
Oh, it was excellent.
You sound great.
Yeah.
Last week
Those
was
guys
a disaster. It's bad.
Oh,
It's all
no.
mine. Awesome. Well, thanks for everyone that was tuning in and is catching this later on. Next week is, I believe, Jonathan Snook. We're really excited to have him in. We'll try and field some questions and get those asked him as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. So until then, happy Sassin, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.